Thank you for joining us today for another edition of Conversations with AARP. I'm Troy Deshabir Schuster, State Director for AARP in the Virgin Islands. We have a timely and necessary discussion ahead. Natural disasters like hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and earthquakes have struck the United States more frequently and more destructively in the past few years than ever before. These disasters can strike unexpectedly, causing catastrophic destruction and leaving individuals and their families vulnerable to chaos. But by planning ahead, you can protect yourself, family, home, and belongings in advance of a disaster. As the nation's largest social change organization, AARP understands the importance of protecting consumers in times of crisis and has been advocating for increased resources that focus on mitigation in addition to preparedness that will serve all Americans, especially older adults. That is why we have invited Attorney Glendina Matthew, Acting Director of Banking and Insurance and Financial Regulation within the Lieutenant Governor's Office, to discuss the topic of safeguarding your financial future in advance of natural disasters. We'll also learn about the division's efforts in safeguarding and protecting Virgin Islands consumers. And so we welcome Attorney Glendina Matthew. Welcome, Attorney.
Good morning. Good morning to the audience.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And thank you so much for making the time to be with us on this show and how timely it is as what nearly became a hurricane is now passing very close to us. We're still in the peak of hurricane season. I understand that's from August 15th to October 15th. And so we're not to October 15th yet, but nonetheless, the hurricane season goes well into November. So we have a very timely topic to discuss today about insurance for your property. But first of all, start off by telling us a little bit about what the Division of Banking and Insurance and Financial Institutions does within the Office of the Lieutenant Governor.
So I am the acting director of the Division of Banking and Insurance. I am Attorney Glendina Matthew, and I should correct myself by saying Division of Banking, Insurance, and Financial Regulation, because we've since changed our name because of the many mandates that we have under the Lieutenant Governor's Office. And of course, the division is a regulatory agency with a dual responsibility to license and regulate banking, insurance, and financial services entities and related service providers that conduct business in the territory. And we equally are responsible for consumer protection. So within our mandate, there are many things that we're required to do. We examine institutions, we investigate complaints, we go do consumer activities, outreach activities. There are many areas within the Division of Banking, Insurance, and Financial Regulation, which have led to our name change. So when we talk about this division, we're not only talking about the banking or insurance, we're talking about international financial services entities, we're talking about finance lenders, we're talking about non-bank ATMs, we're talking about small loans companies, and the list goes on, check cashers, money transmitters, a wide range of financial services areas that we are in charge of regulating.
And so let's say, for instance, a bank wants to start doing business here in the Virgin Islands. So they just set up a corporation and get a business license and start, or do they have to come through your division and work through another process?
They would definitely have to come through our division, and it's depending on the type of bank. If it's a domestic bank, they would definitely need to go through the Division of Corporation and Trademarks. That is run through the director, Denise Johannes. If it is a foreign bank, it requires not only licensure by our office, but it requires federal licensure. So there may be Federal Reserve, FDIC, those hurdles that they need to go through before they even reach to applying in our jurisdiction. And of course, it's a two-stage process. There's a permit process, which allows them to be able to use certain names. And then there's the process where they actually become licensed and is allowed to begin conducting business in the territory.
And so that would be the same for in insurance companies. Now, how does that work between insurance agencies and insurance companies?
So insurance companies, we have two types. We have domestic, which is those incorporated in the Virgin Islands, chartered in the Virgin Islands. And we have foreign insurers, those that are licensed in the United States. And I should say three, because there are also alien insurers, those that are licensed outside of the United States. Depending on the structure, corporate structure will determine whether they need to go to a corporation and trademarks. For instance, domestic, as I indicated, have to go to corporation and trademark because they're chartered here. The foreign banks and alien insurers do not.
Okay.
Licensure is through our office in order to do business in the territory.
So are insurance agencies that sell insurance policies regulated by your office also?
Yes, and one of the things we always remind persons is that your insurance agency is not your insurance company. That your insurance agency is just someone who acts on behalf of the insurance company. So they're responsible for the direct day-to-day contact with you in terms of having a new getting a new policy, renewing your policy, your interaction on a database, maybe filing claims, things of that nature. However, there's a big distinction between an insurance agency and your insurance company. Your insurance company is the one who is required, who writes the insurance and who is responsible for paying claims, actually paying out the claims.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the perils that can be insured against here in the Virgin Islands. What are insurance companies offering for homeowners, property owners in the Virgin Islands?
So we have what we call fire policies that are just the basic policies that are non-windstorm policies. Then we have windstorm policies, and generally what we call the HO2, the homeowners policy, that generally include not only windstorm and fire and theft and all of those other perils, but it's a comprehensive policy, including liability, including like general liability. Of course, for instance, if someone falls on your property, you're going to need general liability. If there's a theft in your property, someone goes in, they break in, that's where the theft provision would apply. If there's a hurricane, then we talk about the windstorm portion of the policy. And it's very important that persons review their policy to know what insurance they're carrying, because we've had situations where sometimes persons say, okay, this year I don't want to take windstorm insurance. Maybe it could be because of the cost. And then the next year they continue renewing with a windstorm, never making that change. So we encourage people to review their policy to make sure what coverage they have, because the last thing you would want to be, last situation you would want to be in is that there's actually a storm, there's a hurricane, and you don't have that coverage. So we definitely encourage you to make sure you review your policies. And I always tell people, this is where your agent is important. Your agent is the first line of person that you should be in contact with. You should know your agent. It should be first nature to contact your agent if there is any kind of incident, whether it's a theft, hurricane, whatever, because they're your first line in terms of filing your claim and making sure the process goes smoothly in terms of resolving your claim.
Now, would windstorm insurance also cover flooding, or is that another peril that needs to be insured against?
That is another, that is a good question, because we constantly remind persons that flood insurance is generally not covered in your homeowner's insurance policy. So it's important that you, if in fact you're in a flood zone area, that you in fact get flood insurance. Your flood insurance generally in the territory you would get from the FEMA type policies. There's other than commercial policies, there's no other insurer who's currently offering flood insurance except for commercial type policies. So you would want to make sure you have contacted any agent that sells the FEMA products, flood products, and obtain that coverage.
And this is a little bit off topic because we're focusing mostly on hurricanes at this point, but what about earthquakes and tsunamis? How are those insured against?
That is generally under our regular HO2 policies, but we've become so as we're hearing of all these catastrophes, we're becoming more aware that we need to make sure we educate customers about tsunamis, earthquake, because any of those can happen any day. As you know, Puerto Rico, I was looking at something recently, and I saw Puerto Rico has been having a lot of tremors. The Virgin Islands too, but Puerto Rico has been having a lot of tremors. And the fact that they're so close to us, we need to monitor that we have enough coverage if in fact there's a tremor that causes severe damage in the territory. So, and also I would like to note in our one of the things we have done on our website, we've included a lot of brochures and information, not only on hurricanes, but on tsunamis and earthquakes. And let me give you an example. When I attended an NEIC summer meeting recently, I had spoken to one of the commissioners, assistant commissioners for Hawaii. As you know, we had the Hawaii fire, the Mahi fire. And one of the things that he advised me was that they didn't have a lot of brochures about wildfires because that wasn't something they contemplated. So it brought back to me that these are things that maybe we need to incorporate, because just like they, had not thought about, wildfire being, they're susceptible to wildfire. That is exactly what occurred. So that brought in mind that these are some of the brochures we will also be including on our website for persons to look at and review.
Ever since Hurricane Hugo, we have seen a real significant increase in the cost of insurance premiums for real property here in the Virgin Islands, especially windstorm. Can you tell us how that is trending these days, especially with global warming and more threats of hurricanes and catastrophic level hurricanes?
And I must say that after Hurricane Hugo, you're correct. We saw a trend of insurance going up. Then there was a certain point where we saw it kind of stabilize in that we weren't seeing any increases. Of course, we had Irma and Maria, 2017 Category 5 storm that brought severe damages to the territory as well as other Caribbean islands. Since then, we started to see a kind of trend upwards. At this point in time, we are seeing an increase, and the increase is not only the issues related to Hurricane Irma and Maria. Some of the issues are the catastrophes that are throughout the United States that are affecting the reinsurers and insurers that are currently doing business in the territory. Some of the things we are faced with is increases and lack of capacity. One of the things that recently, have come up is the increase in costs, the requirement that reinsurers are requiring insurers to seek rate increases. We have looked at some of the other states to see what is going on. Florida is a prime example of where we're trying to avoid getting there. Florida had about at least a dozen companies that pulled out of the market. They had about a dozen companies or more that are filing liquidation. You know, they're really in a sense of despair relative to windstorm insurance, and we're trying to prevent that from happening here. So we have granted some increases. We have tried to push back as much as we can, but the reality is we want to make sure that there is capacity in the territory so persons who are interested in purchasing insurance can. There is still a even with the increases, there's still a lack of capacity because in terms of new persons seeking coverage, we're in a situation now where companies are kind of monitoring their the amount of coverage they're writing, making sure that whatever coverage they write is in good condition. And this also brings to another topic for consumers. Make sure you're taking pictures of your property. You're updating your files at at the insurance agent's office so that they can properly determine your condition of your property. I know one of the things that we saw or we heard about is that many persons after the hurricanes have not updated their policies or their record to show that they have made the necessary updates or the necessary renovations. It's important that you do so so that your insurance company is comfortable that you have made the necessary preparation if there's another storm and and your damages not be considered pre-existing.
A moment ago, you mentioned reinsurance. Tell us a little bit about reinsurance and how that works and how that's impacting the provision of policies here in the Virgin Islands.
Reinsurance. And when I say reinsurance, a lot of people say reinsurance, what does that mean? And that's exactly always the question. What does that? Reinsurance is insurance companies insuring the book of business that they write. I think many persons, when you talk to them, they think that the insurance company has this wealth of money sitting there, and that is not necessarily the case. The reinsurer is who's responsible for paying a certain percentage or certain amount of the claims. Generally, insurance company will retain a certain amount of claims that they will pay on their own. Let's say the company says any claim up to 100,000, 200,000, we're going to retain paying those. Anything over that amount, the reinsurer will pick up. So this is where reinsurance is very important because reinsurance company can actually be the one that causes an insurance company to go under if there's not adequate reinsurance. So we keep our office has a policy where all insurers are required to carry a 30% PML, probable maximum loss. That means all insurer has to have reinsurance at least 30%. And we've been doing good, at least considering the fact that we had the two category 5 hurricanes. Only one company we had and actually it's one foreign company that became liquidated. So I think we're doing good in our examination and our licensure and our compliance of these companies.
Excellent. So at this point, all insurance companies providing insurance products here in the Virgin Islands for real property have reinsurance at this juncture?
That is correct. And have at least 30%, and some have even more.
Okay, so for the consumer going to any local insurance agency, since you regulate insurance agencies as well, consumers can feel comfortable knowing that whatever policy they buy is a good policy?
They can be rest assured. One of the things that in addition to the examination of companies, we also do certain precautionary measures prior to the hurricane season. We meet with our top insurance companies. We go through their financials. We discuss any concerns they may be, anything that may that we are alerted to. So we're very active with our insurance companies in terms of making sure that they are in compliance and that they have the necessary resources so that if there is a catastrophe, we're comfortable that our residents will be covered.
And many times I've heard people say that over the years they didn't get all the money they were supposed to get, or they thought they should have gotten after a catastrophe because they were underinsured. So tell us a little bit about being underinsured.
Yeah, the issue of underinsurance comes to the fact that there is a requirement that anyone insuring a property has to insure it to at least 80% of the value. Some companies may do it to 100%, but at least 80% is generally the benchmark. What happened is exactly what we talked about, having prior stores, making renovations, doing updates, but not updating their coverage limit to show those renovations or improvements that were made. Many persons, when we had Hurricane Irma and Maria, many persons who, especially those who didn't have damages previously, were carrying coverage limits from back in 89, back in 95. As underinsurance comes into play because it is driven by the market price to rebuild a home. As we know, with inflation and everything else, the cost of rebuilding a home, the cost of renovating a home has significantly increased. And with that, there has to be an increase in your coverage limit consistent with that increase.
Now, here we are in the middle of hurricane season, as I mentioned, still in the peak of it. Are insurance companies still selling policies at this moment to homeowners, property owners here in the Virgin Islands? Or do they have to buy it a certain period of time before hurricane season starts?
Insurance companies are still selling policies. The issue we're having is the issue that we started discussing in terms of the lack of capacity. You'll find that some insurance companies are going to be very selective in terms of what they are allowed to write. And I say allowed to write because of the reinsurers are kind of driving the type of risk that they should be maintaining in their portfolio and the amount. So particularly for persons with wooden structures and mixed structures, this is where we're having the most problems right now. Person being unable to find these type of coverage. What we're encouraging persons is, if you're unable to find insurance through the admitted market, try going to the surplus line market. Surplus line companies are those companies that are authorized to write in the territory, not necessarily that has the same regulatory structure in terms of licensure, but they are registered in this jurisdiction and are allowed to write. So if in fact you're unable to go through the average admitted companies to obtain coverage, try to go through the surplus line market. And we have lists available and can provide to customers who need that information. So you can contact our office for that information if needed.
And these surplus line providers, can they be accessed through local agencies, or you have to go direct to them? How does that work?
They have to be accessed to local agencies, because one of the requirements of a surplus line company, they have to do business with a surplus line broker. and a surplus line broker is required to be licensed by our office. So you can just arbitrarily go to a surplus line company without going to a surplus line broker. They have the same regulatory requirements, they pay tax, these kind of things. So there are certain structures and provisions in the law that safeguard those individuals.
And the surplus line insurance companies, they offer all of the same protections against all the same perils, and do they provide better rates?
Surplus line companies I'm not going to say they're going to offer better rates, because remember, generally these are the products that are not available in the admitted market. So if the rates may be a little higher, because there is a 5% tax in addition to whatever amount you would normally pay in terms of your premium that would be added. But there is that additional safeguard that at least you have the availability of getting coverage, even if it's not through the admitted market. But I always recommend that you always seek coverage through the admitted market first, because the law has certain provisions in place where there are the brokers are supposed to represent that they have sought coverage through the admitted market prior to going to the surplus line market. So the surplus line market is like the last resort.
Okay.
You know, you can get coverage through the admitted market, you go to the surplus line market.
And so now tell our listening viewing audience, how can they find more information on all of this? Do you have a really great website that they can access to find all of this information?
We have a lot of information on our website. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor website is ltg.gov.vi, but our webpage, just go to the Division of Banking, Insurance, and Financial Regulation, and we have a slew of brochures, all kind of information on all kind of topics, not just banking and insurance, but all the areas we regulate. We try to create brochures that and answer questions that we think that the consumer may have. One of the things we pride ourselves on is our outreach activities. We go to the fair, we do St. Croix, St. Thomas, we do VI Housing Finance Authority outreach activity. Any kind of outreach activity that is available, we try to participate so we can hand out these information to person who we may not be in contact with on a regular basis. But if you contact our office and you have any questions, we are able to direct you to our website where you can find the information.
Wonderful. Well, Attorney Glendina Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. The Acting Director of VI Banking, Insurance, and Financial Regulation. Look forward to having you in a future show with us. Thanks again.
And thank you.